Well, hopefully you all had a wonderful weekend. Bishop on Air back at it, live with you. A couple of pre-recorded segments with several guests. Jam-packed Monday. Just got off the line with former state senator Darren Bailey, who's actually down in Texas. He's holding a news conference later this Monday to kind of elaborate on what's going on in the southern border. So we'll hear from him. Also connected with William Kelly, reporter out of Chicago, to get some insight of what's going on up in Chicago. But we also chatted with Todd Vander on Friday after Friday's hearing in the Southern District of Illinois federal courts, where you have a judge who has moved forward with a case challenging the state's gun and magazine ban. So we will actually revisit some of that and also hear from Todd Vander and what he had to say after listening in on that status hearing with the litigants in the case consolidated Barnett v. Raoul. So that's coming up. All right, it's right here with Bishop on Air each and every weekday morning. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Follow along on X, on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble. We're everywhere, all right? Good morning to everybody chiming into the live stream. Patrick, Josh, Friedman, Brock, Randall, I'm your Huckleberry, Sergio, Brett, David, Christopher. Appreciate you guys being here. All right. Stay tuned. More coming up. It's Bishop on Air. Friday, Southern District of Illinois federal judge Stephen McGlynn heard from litigants about the state's gun and magazine ban, and on the merits, they're moving forward. While the state wanted to wrap up discovery in November, the plaintiffs wanted to wrap up discovery in July, and the judge declaring that they have no interest in delaying this case any further. Welcome back. It's Bishop on Air. I'm your host, Greg Bishop. Thanks for hanging out. You can check us out each and every weekday morning here about this time. A little later getting started just because I had a couple of interviews that had to happen earlier than later. So here we are making that happen for you. But we'll get to those a little bit later on. Let's focus in on what's going on at the Southern District of Illinois federal courts. Before so, though, let's take a look at the latest in gun registration data. Let me pull this up from the Illinois State Police websites where you can see this yourself. I have this saved from the last time we did this update. And you'll see of 2.4 million firearm owner identification card holders, around 29,357 registered firearms before the January 1st deadline, and between January 1st and January 23rd, 6,074 additional people registered. But let's refresh, and you'll see that it has jumped up to 6,262 now have registered after the deadline of January 1st. And you can see the breakdown there of the number of firearms that were registered and the total number of accessories and so on. But what's interesting is, and you're seeing people point this out more and more, we've touched on it briefly, we have not seen this 2.4 million FOID card holder number increase since we've been checking these numbers out from October 1st until now. And when you go and you actually look further you can see that while this number has not changed in the past 5 months or so, the 2.4 million, just in the last quarter of 2023, you have the number of new FOID applications that are approved at more than 45,000 just in 3 months' time. And I went ahead and added all these up, and it looks like it's well over 100,000. I think it was close to 200,000. But obviously, you've got the FOID cards number might not be accurate. So while we say that it's 1.47% of FOID card holders who have actually registered, the total number of FOID cards has not been updated on the ISP's website for quite some time. For all of 23, ISP data shows 158,823 new FOID card applicants that were approved. So maybe the percentage is much lower. Regardless, I just wanted to get that as kind of a placeholder here as we talk about what happened at the Southern District of Illinois Federal Court. And if you follow me on X, you were able to see these posts in some more detail, really when it comes to what the judge's sentiments are. And I think that that's extremely important. But here's just some of the encapsulation of those tweets I sent out. You had the Barnett attorney essentially come out and say that they heard the judge loud and clear that it's time for these lawyers to no longer be lawyers by filing briefs, but actually to be trial lawyers. And what needs to be proved from the Seventh Circuit opinion, the Barnett plaintiff said, is how it differs from different cases in the district court and the factual questions from the appeals court. So the state put for the schedule to extend in the fall, says that the plaintiffs haven't been on the same page, and they understand that to move quickly for final resolution, they haven't been able to make a headway with the state on a schedule. They said, quote, the Barnett attorney said, "We're here to work with Your Honor to find out how to move things along as expeditiously as possible, but understand this is unique in light of the Seventh Circuit standard." And I think that Seventh Circuit standard you're going to hear a lot more about as we delve into this more and more. But the judge went on to ask other plaintiffs what issues should be discussed. No one else spoke up. So the judge went ahead and said, okay, firearms that are commonly held, owned, there's a lot that's in the record already. And the judge went on to say maybe some of the plaintiffs that are sellers of firearms can testify that these are weapons that we hold out for sale, and there's already a market for purchasing those by people who own firearm owner identification cards that pass background checks. There's a market for this, the judge said. People in Illinois are buying these guns. The Seventh Circuit talked about 24 million versus some other number. And the judge said, to be candid, we know that there is a sufficient number of AR-15s and other semi-automatic rifles sold in Illinois to holders of FOID cards and that they possessed them legally before the enactment of the statute, the judge said. I don't think it's going to be a tough hurdle to climb for these. Now, he also said the AR-15s may not be widely held, but there could be copycats and knockoffs, he says. But do we think that there will be meaningful contests that there's enough numbers of AR-15s that is not nominal? So again, commonly owned. What's commonly owned? I think that the judge really trying to get to the crux of that. There was also discussion about self-defense, and does that happen outside the home? What are the characteristics of legal self-defense, and so on. The Federal Firearms Licensees of Illinois attorney went on to say that all they need to do is look at whether semi-automatic center-fire rifles with detachable magazines and whether that as a group, as a category, are protected arms or not. And this really deals with what the state was getting after. The state was trying to say time and again, we're just trying to find out what the plaintiffs are aiming for. Pun intended? I don't know, but that's what, a quote that the state lawyer had to say. They need to know what they're aiming at because they want to bring a proper defense. Well, you then had the judge say that he's not interested in delaying this case any further for any length of time so that the government can figure out what they've passed. So again, back to the FFL of IL, they said they don't need to go through every firearm, but making make and model, because unless the state can identify some material difference in those models that would make a difference in the legal analysis, if all we need to do is say such things as a category, we think we don't need to litigate every make and model. We just need to litigate the category. And apparently they've looking at 9 different categories, and you got to think what are those categories: center fire, magazine fed long rifles, semi-automatic handguns with threaded barrels, other types of long guns, other types of shotguns. You can kind of go through and just start thinking about the different categories. And really what they're looking at doing is trying to butt that up against the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals ruling, where they started working in, the question of, was it meant for the military or not? And again, whether or not the 7th Circuit got their analysis correct under the Bruin standard, that's something else that we'll have to evaluate at a later date whenever they get this case from the Southern District, which ultimately could go all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, which is expected. But again, Judge McGlynn saying that he's not interested in delaying the case at all, saying that he doesn't want to give the government more time to figure out what they've passed. McGlynn also went on to say that this is a very important matter. He said the claimants believe that their constitutional rights have been imperiled, and so it's the court's belief that I should try to work through with as much dispatch as possible. Understand that we want to get right with all the record, and whether discovery needs to be exchanged can be exchanged, but also understanding that in these cases there isn't a lot of prolonged and protracted discovery, meaning he wants to get to the merits of this quickly. All right, so that's a little bit of a review of the hearing. They're going to come back on Tuesday. The plaintiffs have to file with the judge saying these are the representatives we want for our consolidated case. So that's who's going to be working on the deposition and discovery timeline. And the depositions are interviews with witnesses and experts, and the discovery is trying to find all the evidence, get all the evidence together. Because in a trial, the defense has to know everything that the plaintiffs know, and the plaintiffs have to know everything the defense knows, and then they make their arguments. So that's what the discovery is finding all of those pieces of evidence. But I connected with Todd Vander, gun rights advocate, Freedom's Steel here on YouTube, and got his take because he was in on that call. He's been what would you call a consultant for the federal firearms licensees of Illinois plaintiffs. And here's his impressions of how this went down on Friday.
So I think there are some unique takeaways from what we heard at the status conference. The judge seems to have his finger on the pulse that the state passed an absolute shit show of a statute, and the government lawyers are playing catch up to try to understand the technicalities and how broad it is. And I think he kind of pinned them on that, thinking that there should be a legislative record to combat this. If you listen to some of the debates that have happened with former Representative Mazzocchi, who was a trial lawyer, who sat there and told some of these people, and they're passing various anti-gun bills, that they didn't develop a record. What record do you have to sustain this in court? And the anti-gun legislators are just too lazy. They think they got the rule of 60 and the rule of 30 in the Senate, and that's all they need. They don't have to justify themselves. And I think the judges caught on to that, the lawyers representing their clients may be behind a power curve because they don't have the record that the judge thinks they would have built if they were going to sit there and tackle a constitutional issue like this that had been before the court on 4 separate occasions, that they would turn around and build a robust record from which the state could defend it. And they didn't do that. They just said it's going to pass muster, the end. And so I think the judge caught that was one particular takeaway. I think the state proposing a schedule that lasts into and beyond the first of next year. I mean, we're just closing up discovery in November, and they're going to want another 30 days on briefs, 60 days on briefs, and then however long a trial is. And the judge wasn't buying that either. He thinks that constitutional rights are being violated, or at least that is in the pleadings, and therefore he wants to see a quick remedy to this to get this on and up. And I think that the state is they're still pole vaulting over mouse poop because they wanted to have an argument today about standing. And you would think that we are well past the standing relevance at this point in time. If we didn't have standing to bring a preliminary injunction, then how do we and we surpassed that hurdle, then how do we not have standing to sue the state? But it sounds like that they want us to provide 200 plaintiffs. They're going to sit there and say, I want to buy a gun, this particular gun by pick a manufacturer, Stag Arms, Rock River, Colt, Sig Arms, whoever, and go through, I want to buy one of these and now I can't, through that entire list of firearms. And we were trying to get them to narrow it down to, say, 9 categories, like magazine-fed semi-autos, and they're still arguing that, well, now we have to prove standing that we have to have somebody who wants to buy a 1911 with a threaded barrel or a Glock 19 with a threaded barrel or whatever. And I think it goes to the ridiculousness that they don't want to argue on the merits. They think we're going to pull something, out of thin air like a magic trick is some gotcha moment when, we've got the facts in the Supreme Court on our side. There's no gotcha. You're just arguing from a position of weakness, and you're trying to formulate. I mean, you've heard Tom DeVore sit there and say that the AG's office simply pulled this training thing for wardens out of thin air. I think they know they're behind the power curve. I think that they know that they don't have a judge who just bends over to the state at any whim, because he's obviously kept us on a tight schedule, and the state filed this status report with their preferred schedule and asking for a magistrate. And again, the judge shot him down and said, this ain't going in front of a magistrate. This is going to be in front of me. And I think he's going to have a discovery status call on what we actually need to ferret out. I think based on listening to him, he thinks we can do the majority of this on paper, that we don't need a boatload of experts and all that kind of stuff. I think he doesn't believe we probably need a lot of depositions. It sounds like he has been reading these cases from across the country and has seen how other states or other jurisdictions have handled this.
Again, that's Todd Vander, gun rights advocate, longtime former NRA lobbyist, consultant for federal firearms licensees of Illinois, listening in and getting the latest on the case in the Southern District of Illinois Federal Court. So we'll see where that goes. Again, tomorrow, the plaintiffs have to tell the judge who exactly is going to be representing those individuals in front of the judge. So clearly a lot more to be said about all of that here in the near future. But you've also got this other case in the Southern District of Illinois, which we don't have time to tackle today, but we will tomorrow, and that's the United States versus Bernard Cherry, where a former felon wanting to exercise their Second Amendment rights appears to have gotten a victory in the Southern District. So we'll touch on that tomorrow. But some of the latest in the litigation against Illinois' gun and magazine ban, right here with Bishop on Air. One of the things we've been focusing a lot on here on Bishop on Air is the migrant crisis. Even though Illinois, and in particular Chicago, that's being impacted directly, is 1,000+ miles from the southern U.S. border, what's going on with the incoming foreign nationals crossing the border outside of regular ports of entry? It's impacting Illinois, despite us being physically a long distance away. Well, I talked with former state senator Darren Bailey, who's running against a Republican incumbent in the Southern District Congressional District, Mike Bost, U.S. Congressman, representative. He's running as an incumbent in the March 19th primary, but Darren Bailey, being a Republican, after not securing the Illinois governorship, decided to run for U.S. representative. Well, he's traveling down to the southern border, and I connected with him earlier today. This is some of what he had to say when we chatted about what exactly he's hoping to do and in the southern U.S. border with a visit and a news conference later on this afternoon. Former state Senator Darren Bailey joins me now. He is actually not in Illinois, where he's from. He traveled down to the southern U.S. border to show what's going on down there. Darren, thanks for taking time with us. Why is this important?
Well, good morning. It's very important because of, I think, recent activities, recent interest of, all Republican governors. They were in Texas at the border yesterday doing a press conference. I mean, this we're starting to see the possibilities that all communities throughout Illinois, might be soon housing illegal immigrants, and this invasion has certainly turned into a crisis that not only is affecting every community, but then we have to back up and take a look at the resources that are being used for this that now aren't being used for our veterans, for our senior citizens, for the people, for American citizens that need the help the most. This crisis is, I believe, out of control like no other crisis ever has been in our country.
So when it comes to what you could possibly do as a member of Congress, I mean, you would just be one of hundreds in a sea of different opinions. What should be done about the influx of foreign nationals crossing the border?
Well, the same thing that was done for many, many years in this country. The fact that if you want to come to this country, you do so legally. This situation that's taking place could very well, upset and turn the tide of governance in our country. So, when you consider the movement that was created since I and other conservative representatives joined the House in Springfield, we spoke up. We wouldn't settle. We wouldn't rest. We continue to educate our constituents, and not just our constituents, but it turned out that we were educating the entire state of Illinois. So, I'm running against someone, Mike Bost, who is a co-chair of the Main Street Caucus. And when you look up the Main Street Caucus to see what they stand for, in 2022, Mike Bost himself purposely said that, well, immigration isn't one of the things we're focused on. We have these 5 pillars, but it's not immigration. Well, these other 5 pillars and nothing else matters for us in Illinois if we don't curb this tide of illegal immigration.
So I guess when you could, get down there and you'll see what's happening. Spell out a little bit of what we expect today with your schedule. I mean, you live in Southern Illinois, but you're down to the southern U.S. border. What are you hoping to learn?
Well, we're going to have some people who are familiar with the area and with the Border Patrol with us, showing us around and giving us the information. I mean, I think everyone knows what is taking place, but with the recent advent of the truckers convoy and just the Republican governors that came down here, I think it's important to be down here and again just raise awareness, because I believe that because of the failure and the lack of action specifically against my congressman, that it has it's leading, I believe, to some really detrimental times for all the people in Illinois. We simply cannot afford this in this nation. We've been spending money recklessly. We've got many, many needs, and now to consider and see the resources that are going towards this. The frustration. I want to take advantage of times like this to point out the failures of my opponent. The very fact that as the chair of the Veterans Administration, that we found out in December that resources from the VA have been going to process these illegal aliens coming across the border for the last several years, and where's the outcry for that? How can you be chair of a committee and not know that? So DC, much like many times in Springfield, is just filled with too much incompetence. And I'm here to call that out and inform the people and let them know that, hey, it's time for a new fighter to take your place.
So is this as simple as just, making people aware of these types of situations, or what specifically could you do as a member of Congress to, I don't know, if Biden gets in another term, what can you do? How do you hold him accountable? Is it passing resolutions or bills to enforce the border, or is it to impeach Alejandro Mayorkas, or to impeach the president, whoever it is in charge? How do you specifically get a hold of the situation?
Well, all of the above, but Greg, I continually believe that the most important issue is exactly that movement that was growing over the last several years, and I believe it has grown much larger even since the November 8th election of 2022, and unfortunately only 45% of all registered voters showed up to vote in Illinois. People are frustrated, and they need to know, not to give up. They need to know that their voice and their vote does matter. But unfortunately, we've had so many failed politicians in Illinois that people want to throw their hands up. And I think that I offer something different. My voice, my fight, it offers hope. It offers another chance. It offers the possibility that we can turn this around. But we have got to have someone like myself. I've proved my work ethic. I will not stop. I won't rest. I'll say what needs to be said. I'll do what needs to be done. And it's to give the people hope that they will rise up and desire to get to get this recklessness and failure of our government under control. And I believe that, in Springfield, it was tough because we're in the super minority, and, laws were being passed. You couldn't really, you had to struggle and fight. That's why our voice became louder. But when we consider the level playing field in D.C., that's where we have a chance. But that's why we need someone fighting for the people and not being so concerned about the next election. That's the failure of why and the reason why we have this problem.
Well, that's former state senator Darren Bailey. Conversation I had with him earlier this morning. We'll have to talk with him again in the near future. I also have to reach out to Mike Bost, the incumbent Republican in that congressional district that Bailey is challenging for the March 19th primary. So interesting to see Darren heading to the southern U.S. border. We will check in to see what he had to say on his social media channels when he holds a news conference at about 1 o'clock Central Time from the southern U.S. border. A former state senator from Illinois who's running for an Illinois congressional district, traveling to the southern U.S. border with, I believe, State Representative Blaine Wilhauer, who also faces a Republican opponent in the March 19th primary. So interesting times, even in Republican politics. You've got some contentious things going on. All right, so there's a conversation with former state senator Darren Bailey. More to come. It is Bishop on Air. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Follow me anywhere. Just search Bishop on Air. Again, talking with William Kelly, reporter out of Chicago. He always is a wealth of knowledge of what's going on the streets up there, and especially the sentiment of the residents.
As you know, Greg, being a reporter, you're out every day talking to real people. People are telling me Chicago is doomed. It's the death knell of Chicago. And these are people who have seen it all. They've seen the lockdown. They've seen the looting. They've seen the violent crime that would make almost any normal human being run for their lives. 14 people were the victims of armed robbery in Chicago last night alone. Okay. Last night, 14 people had a gun pointed at their heads and their belongings stolen. Phone, car keys, wallet, credit cards, sensitive financial information, maybe even sensitive belongings that have emotional, sentimental value, but yet what's I think breaking the straw that's breaking the back of Chicagoans is the migrant apocalypse, really is what it is. And it is a crisis of not only the migrants, but now we have the migrant crime. And sadly, our leaders, the people that you would think would be looking out for the citizens, are blaming the citizens. They're suggesting that the reason why these migrants are being that they're the real victims. The migrants are the real victims. They're being forced into a life of crime because they have not received their work permits. Okay, the question that I'm hearing from people is who would want to employ them? Who in their right mind would say, oh, you know what, I need an employee who, if they don't get what they want immediately, will turn to a life of crime.
Well, and William, a lot of these individuals, the governor says they are asylum seekers, and that's, of course, a probationary period where they come across and they claim asylum and they wait for a hearing, which could be years down the road. But, are these individuals who came across a port of entry in a more proper uniform way, or were they ones that just, crossed the desert somewhere that, was part of even possibly a human trafficking operation that they may have been victim to? There's a lot of considerations into all of this, but clearly the taxpayer cost is growing, especially when you hear about 300,000 meals in a week or the $1.5 million a day it's costing taxpayers. And who's getting these contracts? You were working to try to stay on top of some of this, but is there clarity in how these dollars are actually being spent, and are taxpayers getting a good bang for their buck?
God bless you, Greg. Thank you. You are 100% right. When people hear these numbers, $100 million, what they don't realize is that it's $100 million per company. $100 million for migrant housing, $1 million for migrant security, $1 million for migrant health care. And now we're hearing 100, excuse me, did I say 1 million? I'm $100 million dollars for culturally sensitive food. Now, I can't help but think, if I were, as an Irish Catholic from the south side of Chicago, if I snuck into a country, would I be demanding deep dish pizza? I don't think so. I think I would be grateful for what I had, and I would do my very, very best to be respectful of the society that I crashed, and I would be doing my best to try to somehow fit in with that society, not demand that society start, flying my flag and being sensitive to my culture. So it is it's very, very, very discouraging for the citizens of Chicago. I talk to middle class citizens, the people who are who are straight up footing the bill for all of this, and they're just saying that they just can't do it anymore. They can't provide for a family. They can't and provide for essentially a migrant apocalypse. So I'm hearing from a lot of middle class Chicagoans, that they have to leave Chicago, that Chicago is doomed.
It's pretty remarkable. Of course, Illinois and Chicago, 1,000+ miles away from the southern U.S. border, but the ongoing border crisis impacting the state in a variety of ways that is both humanitarian and the taxpayer cost, and just the questions of spending transparency and maybe what motives are really driving all of this stuff. We'll have to delve in deeper into with William Kelly in the future for sure. But let's talk about safety, William. Of course, we've got the horrible, tragic shootings that happened last week, and in the span of 5 days, 3 young people killed outside of schools in downtown Chicago. You had the governor and the mayor and the Speaker of the House and the Senate President and a whole bunch of other groups get together for an anti-violence initiative. Safer Chicago 2, I think is what they're calling it. All of this while you have the idea of removing police officers from public schools. How do you assess they're getting a hold of the violence in Chicago, or are they just looking to, develop more resources to spend on nonprofit groups rather than having the state's attorney crack down on crime?
Well, both my parents were CPS employees, so I've I have, it breaks my heart on every level to see what has become of our city and what has become of obviously the, Chicago public school system. We had two shootings out in front of Chicago public schools. Students murdered, shot dead on the sidewalk, bled out, and died in front of their school. This should be the focus of the mayor, not migrants, not all of these other issues that are diverting millions, hundreds of millions upon hundreds of millions upon hundreds of millions of dollars away from the residents of Chicago, the resident homeless, the elderly, and other vulnerable populations. So, I mean, it is truly a crisis of leadership. It's not just the violent crime crisis. It's not just the migrant crisis. It's a crisis of leadership that I think the average Chicagoans are really concerned about. That's really the underlying frustration or question that they ask me, and hoping that I'm going to provide an answer that somehow that they can't understand why the mayor of Chicago would stick to a policy of demanding that Chicago police officers be removed from Chicago public schools on the heels of two separate shootings that resulted in the murder of Chicago public school students. I mean, no right-thinking person can possibly make sense of that unless they understand Mayor Johnson's relationship with the Chicago, teachers union, and what is it exactly that they're trying to hide? The only reason that you wouldn't want, a police officer in your workplace would be if you're trying to hide something. Could it possibly be, millions of dollars worth of missing computers? Could it possibly be, multiple cases of sexual abuse and rape against public school students? I mean, what is it? And the question should be asked and it should be answered, Greg. And to add to the frustrating combination of crisis in the city of Chicago, I'm to this day prevented as a reporter from attending Chicago City Hall press conferences to ask these questions. And I think that it's just obvious to anyone who's paying attention that when a politician, when an elected official, does not want to answer, does not want to even be asked a question, it's pretty obvious that they have something to hide.
William Kelly, reporter out of Chicago. Always appreciate hearing your perspective, what's going on the streets up there. We'll definitely connect in the near future. All right, be safe.
God bless you, Greg. Thank you.
Always good to talk with William Kelly. So appreciate you guys tuning in as always. And you can find me anywhere. Just search Bishop on Air on X, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Rumble, on Instagram, on really anywhere. Just search Bishop on Air. And subscribe, hit that notification bell. If you enjoy what's going on, get yourself a Bishop on Air coffee mug. Why not? Couple of different options, t-shirts. I drank all my coffee, so that was a fake sip of coffee. Gotta get to the... Oh, geez. All right, now I gotta go change shirts. I appreciate you taking time with us each and every weekday morning. We'll be back at it tomorrow here with Bishop on Air. God, I can't believe I actually spilled coffee on me. It was empty, for crying out loud. The heck? What the heck, man? No. By the way, remember months ago when I gave away a bunch of patches? One patch going to a Chicagoan, a listener, sent those back in October, if you guys remember. Some of you got your patches, right? I still have some on my chin. I got a drinking problem. Bob Sneed with the reference to airplane. Yeah, the splash. totally unrelated. Have you guys ever seen the Big Bus? Fantastic disaster movie. Anyways, where was I? Oh yeah, patches. So a listener up in Chicago messaged and said he wanted a patch. Remember that back in October? So when I was making that transition from terrestrial radio to my own thing here. Well, I just a couple of weeks ago got the letter back with the patch still inside saying return to sender. So John, you will be getting your patch. I'll get that back in the mail, I promise. But I've just had the worst time with the United States Postal Service. Anyways, all right, guys. Really do appreciate you tuning in each and every weekday morning. We've got, of course, a ton going on this week. The state legislature returns tomorrow, bright and early, and there's going to be a whole bunch happening. So we may do some preview on that tomorrow. We'll have to delve into this case, U.S. versus Cherry in the Southern District of Illinois and the implications of that moving forward, and take a look at a whole host of other things. But I got to get out of here. Have yourselves a wonderful rest of your Monday. Happy Monday. And let's get back into it with Bishop on Air. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell.